Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on the methods and best practices for optimizing business processes. If any of the participants cannot hear me, please take a look at the audio settings screenshot displayed on the next slide. If any questions happen to come up during the course of the webinar, you can type them up and send them to us at any point in time. If there's any time left in the end, we'll go over them, and if not, we'll follow up with you over email in the next couple of days. It's important to know that all of the participants in today's webinar are listed as anonymous. Only the host and the presenter's names will be actually made visible. Last but not least, the webinar is going to be recorded, and the link to the recording will be sent to you by email in case you want to refer back to it or watch it again. That being said, without any further ado, let me introduce myself and our presenter for today. My name is Michael Kamberoff, and I'm a sales consultant in the headquarters of the BOC Group in Vienna, Austria, and I'll be your host for today. And our presenter is Tom Brennan. He's a part of our global business development team, and he's based in the Irish office of the BOC Group. Tom is a senior consultant and an expert in both business process management and enterprise architecture. Once more, on behalf of both Tom and myself, we would like to welcome you to today's webinar. Just quickly before we start talking about business process optimization, I'm going to give you some background information about our company as well as some key facts and figures. The BOC Group was founded in 1995 as a spin-off of the University of Vienna and is today a leading international manufacturer of software tools for globally recognized management approaches. Through the constant innovation and the improvement of our established processes, we assure the strong continuity of the development of both our software and our service offerings. The BOC Group is headquartered in Vienna, Austria, but our operations span throughout the world with offices in Germany, Spain, Ireland, Greece, Poland, Switzerland, and France. All of our offices are based in Europe, but we address the needs of the customers from all over the world through our extensive partner network. As you can see on the slide, we have over 90 partners in more than 25 countries. In regards to clients, we have more than 1,000 in over 50 countries with a growing user community of over 85,000 users. With the support of our partners and with our clients and the entire user community, we have successfully executed more than 5,000 projects in now more than 20 years. The BOC Group is represented by two major products, and those are AdoIT, which focuses on enterprise architecture, and Adonis, which is centered around business process management. Both products offer comprehensive functionalities that relate to GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, which as a field on its own offers methods and mechanisms for the evaluation and the analysis of the risk portfolio of your organization. Our products can operate both on-premise and as a software as a service type of a license. If you're interested in different license offerings, you can find more information about that on our website. In the following management areas displayed on this slide, the BOC Group happens not only to be a tool manufacturer, but also a very experienced consulting company. So other than our two products that I just mentioned, Adonis and AdoIT, we also offer extensive consulting services, trainings, workshops, coachings, etc. The products of the BOC Management Office that are used in base scenarios to usually model business processes, process maps, or enterprise architectures can also be used to document and maintain the risk portfolio and the application landscape of your organization. And that directly relates to back to GRC. So for example, stakeholders responsible for the governance and compliance within the organization might be interested in whether or not the firm is compliant with ISO standards, let's say in production companies, with Basel III or Solvency II for banks and insurance companies, as well as any other legal standards for various industries and businesses. So with the comprehensive module that we have in GRC, as well as the consulting and support that we provide in that management area, stakeholders in the organization that use Adonis or AdoIT can also achieve those GRC-related tasks. The different roles and the different stakeholders from the organization naturally have different responsibilities in regards to the process architecture and the repository. But as I just briefly mentioned, they're also able to conduct multiple evaluation and analysis techniques within the tools with the goal to be able to prepare the company for things like audits and, generally speaking, any checks or any necessary measures that need to be taken in relation to the compliance measures within the company. A detailed overview of how our products as well as our services can support you and your organization in the audit preparation have been provided in some of the previous webinars of this year, as well as some of the upcoming webinars. And the schedule for those you can find on the website, as well as the older on-demand webinars. Today's webinar on business optimization falls in 2 out of 6 categories of the BOC webinars for 2017. Towards the end of today's webinar, I'll provide you with more information about the topics, all of the 6 topics, and the related webinars that are coming in the next months. With all that being said, I would like to thank you for sitting through this introduction, and I will now pass on the mic to our presenter for today, Tom, who will jump into today's topic. Thank you very much, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for the introduction. I would also like to welcome all of today's participants, and in today's webinar I would like to introduce approaches for process optimization, from the importance of having an as-is model, the subsequent process analysis that's based on your as-is state, to the identification, implementation, and then the communication of any potential for improvement within the organization. So I'll also give a brief insight into and methods used by BOC in the context of our optimization projects. And yeah, I'd also like to point out that just due to the kind of time constraints today, only a real summary of our method and range of functions will be demonstrated. So for all topics and suggestions, as mentioned, we can answer them at the end once you forward them, maybe not in the time frame of the webinar, but we'll gladly follow up afterwards to answer anything by email. So let's start by looking at some of the main reasons why processes often don't maybe run as you would imagine or as you might expect, and therefore most likely fail. Perhaps the result of the process is not clearly understood or identified, so if somebody doesn't know where or why a certain activity should be carried out, it's always going to be difficult to execute that correctly. Maybe the process is not documented, so especially in the case of more kind of complex processes, if there's several contact people or kind of roles involved, you may have many kind of organizational interfaces that are not clearly described. Therefore, lots of time and resources will be wasted, which in turn is basically reflected in a low quality process. The third reason could be that the process is not supported by management. So this is kind of a typical kind of siloed approach, or maybe a more function-oriented view of the processes that doesn't actually consider the overall process kind of as a whole. Our fourth reason could be that the process maybe doesn't evolve over time. So one of the characteristics that processes should have is the ability to be able to adapt to kind of changing conditions, both kind of internally and externally to the organization. Maybe process errors kind of have been kind of ignored or overlooked, so the process management team maybe do not kind of react to any irregularity or kind of deviation in the actual process execution, or the real process execution, really until the process might explode, or kind of the deviation from the process can no longer be hidden, so it actually comes into view. But at this stage it's typically kind of too little too late, so you're really looking to have insight into what's actually happening in your processes. And lastly, the process may not be able to be measured, so either the reason for this could be that either the data is missing, or again it's not clear what value the process delivers, so it's not actually clear then when the process is actually in fact getting worse. So this can obviously then happen over time based on either the kind of quality of the process or the quality of the resources that are actually supporting the process. So to conclude, really a kind of a more kind of holistic process optimization approach should really take into consideration the many factors that kind of go far beyond just the kind of sequence of process steps. So I'd like to explain this a little bit more in detail with the next slide. So in order to be able to offer products and services, a solid organizational structure is required. So this on the one hand is defined by firstly the organizational structure, meaning that the sum of all of the employees of the company together with their kind of both functional and kind of hierarchical allocation to their predefined organizational units and predefined management structure. But on the other hand, a structured process organization is also required. So these are basically all of the business processes of a company together with the resources that are then required to support and run the processes. So these three elements, your product, services, the organization, and its processes, are interdependent, but they're obviously also interrelated and therefore interact with each other in some way. So the fourth element that brings it all together is the information and communication technology. We live today in the information age, or rather more at this stage, it's more the information and communication age, basically because of kind of social media, and communication and collaboration has really taken on kind of a new dimension. ICT further enables the development of our products and services, the optimization of our processes, and also supports the organization as more of a kind of a knowledge and learning society. So ICT really has a significant impact on the processes. Basically on the design is also dependent on both the technical and the financial resources that are available to a company at a given point in time. And we have an on-demand webinar on digital transformation and discussing some interesting kind of ideas around this topic. But process management is constantly kind of moving around within these kind of four core elements. So what we see then as what's represented within the kind of corporate business world, it can't exist completely kind of autonomously. Internal and external factors continue to have an impact on our company as a whole, such as, you know, the economical or political conditions, changes in standards and regulations, and maybe environmental requirements, or even the behavior of our competitors will actually have an influence on how we conduct our business internally. So let's take a look at this in the context of a process example. So on our next slide, we can consider an activity for, let's say, a credit card application. So in a classic kind of credit card application process, the role of the customer advisor is the person who will actually perform the activity. The application could be processed in an internal application system, and in order to carry out the activity, the customer advisor could use various kind of guidelines or checklists. There's also a risk in terms of kind of a credit application for kind of manipulation or fraud. So let's say that the customer advisor is actually a so-called good friend of the customer, and there could be some risks involved. And from an ICS viewpoint, we should really control or define a control, which is then performed in the kind of back office to actually validate the authentication of the actual person applying for the loan. And so that would be the kind of more offline classic variant of this process. But as many of you listening are probably thinking now, that the last credit card application you may have been taking place online. So the last time I actually applied for a credit card, I entered my information directly in the web, in a web front end. Maybe the website could offer you a tutorial on actually how to apply in this way. But there's also then going to be a risk kind of from an online perspective that the person applying is not actually the person who they say they are. So that the keyword here being kind of customer authentication, or kind of knowing your customer. So this could all then be checked within a kind of an online authentication by a third party. So basically what our message here is that the context of the process step is really important here. So in this case, whether the application is being recorded kind of online or offline, and it's only when you know the kind of context of your process, the whole process, that you can actually begin to look for and aim for real kind of targeted optimization. Okay, so we can achieve this in different ways with the use of our tools, such as the Adonis platform, where the first step is to really document a kind of an inventory of all of your company's assets, or kind of elements, we can call them, of your company. And the assets that you see here are the real kind of building blocks of your company. And it's with the connection of the assets that basically then becomes the actual blueprint for your organization. So by linking these assets together, you then are basically documenting your knowledge. And then by evaluating all of the assets, you're either making kind of implicit knowledge that you weren't aware of more explicit, or actually developing new knowledge that you weren't actually aware of beforehand. So let's now just take a look at our approach. So in order to be able to recognize where any optimization kind of potentials lie, and especially in order to be able to then act on them, we basically distinguish between the two different disciplines. So we have process analysis and evaluation, and also process optimization. So on the basis of the weak points and the real optimization potentials that are identified during the process analysis phase, the processes then can be optimized and actually brought through to actually become your desired to-be state. So process analysis is more of a kind of a systematic investigation on the processes first of all. Then we take a look at the resources required, and then the kind of decomposition into their parts to understand the process first of all, because you've got to have to know what's happening before you can then identify any weaknesses, which are then your potential for improvement. So the optimization process should include the elimination of the weak points identified during the kind of as-is process development in order to then be able to develop what your target process should be. So it involves then the transformation from the as-is process to a desired to-be state, as well as the continuous improvement of all of the associated kind of resources and equipment that's really required to support the process. So in addition, kind of away from this, an optimization process could also involve the complete redesign of the business process without actually taking into account the current state, but that's more along the lines of business process engineering. So the activities required for sustainable process optimization really has to be kind of embedded in the process management system or real kind of culture of the organization, and therefore requires a sort of an iterative approach. So with the BOC Group's process management lifecycle, for example, the activities of analysis and optimization are largely kind of integrated into our process optimization section, which is completed during the kind of process implementation, process execution, and process controlling phases. So analysis activities, as I've already mentioned, starts with the first of all, the data collection and the documentation of the as-is process by means of using both quantitative and also qualitative criteria in the identification for and looking for real kind of optimization potential, where the optimization tasks themselves are more comprised of actually the preparing for the kind of removing the weak points and then the introduction of the new target processes. So this may also involve making sure that the organization is then really ready for the planned changes that are coming, which optimization potentials are going to be kind of introduced first and needs to be decided at this point. So we could perhaps do a kind of a cost-benefit analysis at this stage. So with the kind of 20 years experience that the BOC Group has, we can obviously support you in all related activities. But we'd now like to take a closer look at our approach and kind of best practices, especially in the area of analysis and optimization. We can use a kind of a selection of techniques for analyzing weaknesses, maybe using kind of maturity models or reference models, as well as very kind of specific analysis and evaluations. Okay, so as a kind of obviously a proven starting point for analysis and optimization, we obviously have a number of inputs from the process documentation phase. We have the process flow here, which contains both the graphic but also the information on all of the assigned assets, such as roles, IT systems, documents, but also risks and controls, and also information on any kind of key weak points that were discovered during the kind of process documentation phase should be here. We may have some evaluations on already existing process indicators, key performance indicators, and there also could be some notes placed on models from inputs from maybe internal company suggestions or kind of feedback from the more people on the front line. And also we could have maybe some complaints or issues that have been sent in externally, which will all be taken into account when we're trying to kind of optimize our processes. So the ability to then manage this information in a really kind of a structured BPM tool is going to be crucial to both the kind of efficiency, but also of the success of your process management initiative. So this is also the reason why we are kind of operating or running our optimization projects using a tool such as Adonis MP. So let's now be more kind of specific about what techniques are available. Again, we distinguish between quantitative and qualitative methods. In the first category, we have maybe static and dynamic analysis. We have computational evaluations or simulations such as, path analysis, capacity analysis, and also workload analysis. But in addition, you could perform, process-based personnel requirements analysis or even process costs analysis. Among the qualitative methods, we identify kind of process weakness analysis, for example, the analysis of a process with predefined kind of checklists or questionnaires done either kind of individually or together in workshops. We can look at the application of maturity and reference models and even comparison of the company's processes with the reference processes. So that's really the kind of starting point to get you off the ground running along with benchmarking as well. So today we're going to focus on a selection of the qualitative methods and techniques. So as an example of methods for analyzing weaknesses, we could give a kind of a copy of a structured questionnaire which we use to analyze weaknesses in our projects through both kind of individual interviews and workshops. So for example, the focus of such a questionnaire could be on the assessment of customer satisfaction and process familiarity for the participants. So do the guys actually executing the processes know what they're supposed to be doing? As well as the clarity of any responsibilities and again kind of interfaces or handoffs within the process. We can check whether the kind of designated times and kind of deadlines are being observed and whether or not the kind of communication channels that we have are kind of functioning as expected. So another possibility for the analysis and identification of optimization potentials are through the use of maturity models. They are again used to assess both the quality of your process by means of an assessment and then also to compare them against the desired state to try and move from the maturity level 1 through 5 from a kind of a non-existent state to an optimized state. A few weeks ago, we already had a webinar which I'd like to mention to you again. So you can also access all past webinars, including this one, on our website, both free of charge and on demand. So over the years, the BOC group, we've collected and kind of developed and produced and really refined a kind of a comprehensive catalog of reference models, which it's really provides a kind of a valuable starting point, as I said, to kind of get you off the ground, and really a kind of a benchmarking base for both a variety of industries, but we also have reference models kind of across industries and across disciplines. So we've got reference models for processes such as banks and insurance companies, as well as reference catalogs and risks or real kind of special compliance catalogs for standards such as ISO 9001. So it just gives you a kind of a faster entry point into your process documentation and even for the creation of kind of audit compliant documentation for your organization. So such models that we have listed here have a lot of detail and can provide real kind of valuable information, but they can quickly and easily be adapted to suit your company or also just used as a kind of a comparison aid with your kind of specific or more unique processes. But thanks to the kind of structured input, kind of recording and administration of information within Adonis, the identification and real kind of elaboration of the following design possibilities is supported. So we can optimize the process logic through, elimination, parallelization, consolidation, or even kind of outsourcing of process steps. We can kind of standardize and automate process steps, but also the formation of kind of process variants for being able to kind of adapt your process to the actual, or the reference process to the individual environment, and how this is actually supported in more concrete terms. We can now look at with some kind of examples that we have kind of specific questions where with the answers already available, and then if time permits, I think we should be able to take a look directly in Adonis and to work on kind of a live example as well. So the first question could be which process steps are actually carried out manually or semi-automatically. So this can be found by the means of just a simple query, which is integrated in our kind of search and analysis components. So you can analyze here which activities in the process are either value creating and which are not. So it's just a really simple way of kind of analyzing the contents of the repository. We could also look at which roles are involved in which process steps, and also where are the kind of organizational interfaces or kind of handoffs. So the interfaces and handoffs can be displayed using the pools and kind of lanes within the BPMN 2.0 method in the process model itself, or we can run or execute a more kind of a racy matrix to see what responsibilities are defined per activity, which is just a way of visualizing the information differently in a matrix view as opposed to the actual process model itself. How can I perform a more qualitative analysis and kind of evaluation of my processes that we have on my process map or my kind of process overview, and compare them against each other based on the kind of classification attributes. Processes that we have could be evaluated according to certain criteria and then compared using a portfolio view that you see here. So in this case, we're looking at the process frequency, how complex it is, and what business value the process is delivering. We can take a look at which documents are required to for each of the various process steps in my model, and we can also determine if there's any kind of loose ends in the document flow. So here you can display reference documents kind of quickly and easily using the kind of a matrix overview again, or we could look at kind of input and output analysis of the documents and see what's being carried out according to the activities in the process. So which documents are supporting which steps, and also which processes as well that it's documented as either an input or an output. We can also compare process variants. So different process designs, perhaps for maybe regional or department differences, can be represented using process variants. Here we can see the graphical model comparison where we see what activity has been added from version 1 here to version 2 of our Create New Customer process. And we can also take a look at how we can determine which kind of company assets are going to be affected by a planned optimization initiative. So this kind of information can be found with just a simple execution of the dependency analysis on a single initiative object within the repository. And the system basically enables the rapid kind of collection of corporate data like processes, organizational units, documents, and IT systems that are going to be affected by any of the planned change. So in order to see how these analyses can be kind of carried out quite easily in the software, I'd just like to switch to Adonis to take a look at some examples in the tool. So I'm just going to log in here as a guest who has kind of lots of permissions here for demonstration purposes, so you can see what scenarios he's been assigned to. So today we're going to look just into the read and explore scenario. So when we go in here, we've got a kind of a start screen with an overview of what's happening in the repository. We can see what's changed, if anything has changed in the repository, any new models or objects, what kind of tasks have been set. We can see what processes I'm actually involved in or responsible for. But if we just click here into one of my favorites, we can just take a look at the company map for our road trip example. And we can see how the company map has been split into our management, core, and support processes. We can already drill down from here to see what actual details lies behind this process. So we can drill down both from a kind of a hierarchical way from drilling into the process, and also jump back to the actual company map here as well, using the little kind of back and forward arrows. If we open up the notebook for a single kind of process object here, we can already see the aim of the process, what's expected as a result. We can take a look here what the description of the process is. We can see who's responsible if we knew who the process owner was, but also here around the kind of classification and potential for improvement. We can obviously do an analysis of our process and actually add how complex it is, how often it happens, does the process add any business value, and looking at the potential for kind of improvement. We can see with the as-is assessment how cost efficient the process is, if it's well supported by IT or not, if there are any risks associated, and how mature the actual process is. So quite quickly from the kind of process landscape view, we can just drill into the notebook of the process object and really see where we have room for improvement from the documentation perspective. We can take a look here and take a look at a view from selecting 4 of our processes. We can go to create a view, such as the portfolio view that we saw on the slides, and we can look at the view in terms of the process cycle time, the quality of the process, and also the customer satisfaction. So this is all taking into account information that's been added by our process design team and process modelers based on their kind of interviews and workshops. So you can see if we just hover over one process, we can see what's being input. So it's the process is good quality, it is good cycle time, and we haven't input anything about customer satisfaction. But basically you can then use these kind of portfolio views for communication with your stakeholders. So you can export it as an image, or you can even save the process as a model as well. So it can be saved as a model. Oh, if I can turn off the state filter, I would have been able to then save the model as a, or save the view as a model. Okay, so Adonis also supports the kind of entire life cycle, as we mentioned, in particular the kind of mapping and documentation and evaluation of target variants. So here we can see for the evaluate and control trip, we've got 2 different variants of the same process for different regions, region A and region B. We can first look at the region A process. So here we see that the process in detail. But if we want to compare it against the other variant to see maybe what the kind of minor differences are between our 2 variants of the process, we can select it here in the Explorer. So in the Explorer, it finds where the model is stored, and we can see evaluate road trip for region A and for region B. So we can select the 2 options here and create a different view. Compare the 2 models against each other. So if I just zoom out a little bit, and we can then scroll through, so we've got a graphical visualization of what's different between the 2 processes. So we've got our base model here, region A against region B. So similar to our kind of credit card application, in one case, the guys are decided to provide feedback electronically, and in this case they actually want to arrange a more concrete face-to-face meeting to debrief the actual road trip they're going to go on. But in terms of the graphical model comparison, you can see what's being removed from a process in red, what's been added in green, and you also get an overview of any of the attribute changes down below in a more tabular form, which can also be exported to Excel then for analysis as well. Okay, so just moving back to our company map, we can just take a look at another one of the view types that we have. So we can zoom in here first on our 4 processes, and maybe this time look at what resources are assigned to support the various processes that we have. So again, we select our objects, go to create view, and this time we look at our matrix view and our process resources. So again, quite quickly, based on the kind of inventory and the connecting the dots between the assets of your company together with the processes, we can get a quick overview here for the 4 processes that are included in our view, what IT systems or what documents are used both as an input-output and also what's as a referenced IT system element. So if I just open up the legend down below, you can see we also could have had kind of infrastructure elements or services, or at a more lower level of detail we could have attributes and entities. But we've got just the relation between our assets together with our processes and what the relation exists. So all of these views can also be kind of easily defined by the administrator in our administration toolkit, so you're not limited to what views you can actually have here. Okay, I'm just going to switch now back to the slides just to finish up. So I'm just going to return just to see whether the mentioned kind of difficulties can actually be then mastered and resolved. So the purpose and expected outcome of the process can be defined in the kind of corresponding model attributes and then also kind of published to the organization. So we've resolved that one. Adonis also supports a more kind of simple business-oriented documentation of your processes. Responsibilities are clearly assigned in the system and then serve as the kind of basis of basically your own kind of perception of what tasks or what processes you're involved in. So the process manager, for example, could easily kind of run a query and see where they are involved and responsible. The system supports the kind of regular kind of revision of the process documentation. We didn't see it today, but we have kind of a release workflow process that you can kind of set validity dates on your processes and really have then a kind of a check at the end of the validity period to see if you want to either make changes to the process or prolongate the current version if it's still fit for purpose. So we really ensure then that the processes are kind of adapted to changing conditions and that they remain valid. We can also design variants as well as the kind of comparison functions to be able to anticipate and control any kind of process errors to make sure that you're just basically keeping up to date on changes. And then last but not least, we've got the kind of linking of process indicators, which then KPIs to really give the decision makers basically the required information as well as their status to be able to then track and ultimately react on time. So I hope that I was able to give you a kind of an interesting insight today into the kind of approaches and tools in our process optimization projects. Of course, we're available at BOC with our consulting services to support you in your optimization projects. So please contact your nearest BOC office for further information. But I'd like to thank you very much for your participation today, and I'll return you now to Michael to wrap up. So thanks again.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tom. All right, everyone. So as a conclusion, and as mentioned earlier, I would like to provide you with an outlook on some of the upcoming webinars. As I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, the BOC webinars for 2017 fall within 6 major categories, which you can find on top of this slide. And below, you can find 3 of the webinars that are coming in the next few months. So the next webinar we have is going to be at the end of July, which is going to focus on BPMN 2.0, the notation, the standard notation, as well as our version of it, which we like to call BPMN Fit for Business, an extension of the standard BPMN 2.0 notation, what we've brought into it from our best practices and our over 20 years of experience. The webinar after that is going to be at the end of August, 31st of August, which is going to be about the implementation of the European Union General Data Protection Regulation and how you can do that with Adonis and AutoIT. And generally speaking, the webinar is going to focus on the extension packages that we have available for organizations to be able to deal with these new data protection regulations. And last but not least, a bit further down the line, but during the 19th of October, we're going to have a webinar which is going to focus on enterprise architecture and specifically Archimate and how you can make that fit for your business, how you can use it in your organization. We would like to thank you for your interest in today's webinar and for your attention. If you want to see a detailed list of the webinars that are to come, as well as the webinars that have passed, as well as information about each webinar's agenda, you can find that information on the website. And of course, if you have any questions that you didn't manage to ask today, you can get in touch with us over social media as well as directly from our website where we have a contact form and you can contact one of our consultants directly. If you currently have any questions and haven't typed them up already, please do that now. We'll follow with you via email in the next following days. Should you have any further questions, as mentioned, we're always available by phone or by email. And that being said, on behalf of both Tom and myself, we would like to thank you for attending today's webinar, and we sincerely hope to be joined by you again soon. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.